On this Martin Luther King Day, we remember the man who helped lead this country through some of its most challenging days, and yet we are reminded that we are still not where we need to be. The dream does live on, but are we any closer to making it a reality? It's an important question, and we have the perfect guest to answer. All right, let's take all of this one-on-one with the son of the late civil rights leader, Martin Luther King III. Martin, always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, and same here.
On this day, of course, we wish our best to the family, and it is important that the message lives on, as relevant today as ever. Where do you want people to have their heads and their hearts on this day?
Always, this is a period to look back, and quite frankly, this is a little bit different than other years, largely because it is 50 years since my father was assassinated. And so as a result, many are looking backward to determine how much progress we've made. I always say that it's wonderful because in January we have an opportunity to look back, reflect, and say, well, we did not achieve fully the dream last year, but we can start every January, start anew. And I think what's probably most difficult this particular year is our country appears to be so divided because of the national leadership. I always say we can and we must do better. We're a much better nation than the behavior that we're seeing exhibited from our leadership at this point.
So let's put the principles of your father that you maintain today into practice in analyzing what we're living through right now. When you hear the President of the United States say, why do we need to have so many people from these South and Central American places, Africa? Why don't we have more people from Norway? How do you take that?
Well, I think those comments are extremely racist comments. And I think that the president has got to be engaged in some sensitivity and heart changing. And when I say heart, we got to appeal to his heart, because there's something wrong, it seems, to me, when you make comments that way. And maybe that's what you believe. I mean, it must be the first thing he believes, because that's the first thing that came up. And the reality is diversity is what's made this nation great. People from all over the world have come to our shores and made this country great, and diversity will continue to build upon our country.
So there are two things. One, you really believe that the president has a problem with his heart?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you say something like what he said, I do have to at least raise that question. Some may go further and say he is a racist. What I am saying is his comments were extraordinarily racist.
What's the difference between saying something that's racist and being a racist?
Well, I think we have to, the thing that we have to be, there are a lot of people who can say things racist, and that's unfortunate. So it's unfortunate, his comments. But my question and concern is, he is the President of the United States. He has the ability to execute on that racism. And if he does that, then it definitely says he is a racist.
He says
if he does
he is not a racist. He says he is the least racist person that we will ever interview. You met with him last year. When you looked him in the eye, what was your sense?
I wasn't evaluating that particular subject at that time. I was focused on a very narrow issue of voting rights and voter suppression. He later on came out and created a voter fraud commission. Obviously, it is disbanded, so there was no voter fraud. He's not addressed that issue yet. My issue was an issue of saying, let's put a picture on the Social Security card, and therefore we will give everybody. We take away that issue of ID. Everybody will have an ID. And he said at the time, that sounds like an interesting idea. I'm going to convene and have you come to the White House once I'm elected, which would have been the next day, actually, was sworn in. And of course, obviously, that has not happened.
He got a lot of dap for meeting with you last year. It mattered to people that Martin Luther King III went and met with President Trump. Do you regret that meeting, given what's happened since?
No, I do not regret. I think you have to always appeal to those in leadership. In the late 50s, my father appealed to President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon and had a relationship with Vice President Nixon. In the early 60s, my father appealed to President Kennedy and Vice President Johnson. And then in the mid 60s, President Johnson and Vice President Humphrey. We've got to always be in dialogue, appealing to the administration if we ever want to see true change come in our nation.
Let me ask you to comment on what Alveda King, your niece, said about the president. She gave him a much more positive review. She thinks it's outrageous that he would be called racist, that because he respects the lessons and teachings of your father and that he has worked on prison reform and some other issues, she believes that he should be held in high esteem.
I think everybody has, in all families, we all have different points of view. No family is monolithic. No group of people are monolithic. And so I would counter that. And, you know, one of the things, if you remember, the president went to see the Pope, and he gave the Pope all of my father's books. What I would employ the president to do is to get those books for himself and to read them. And then he can begin to understand who Martin Luther King Jr. was and what he was doing.
You don't think he's read your father's books?
I doubt it. I'd be very surprised. I'd be pleasantly surprised, but I'd be very surprised.
You think he'd give them as a gift to the Pope but not know what's in them?
I think that is exactly what happened.
Well, we don't know, and you can ask that one. Let me know what answer you get back from the White House about that. I got enough battles to fight. Martin Luther King III, especially today, but every day. Your message is welcome, and I wish you and the family the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what you do every day.
All right, our thanks to Martin Luther King III. It's important to get his perspective on this day and really every day. All right, so another story.